give time to Aris.
Okay, good morning. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm Dwi Aris. I'll be your moderator for this plenary session. We'll have two distinguished guests. We will give you the lecture about precision medicine. For the first speakers, I would like to invite Prof. Wang-Tso Lee from National Taiwan University Children's Hospital. Okay. He will give a talk about precision medicine in developed country. This is his profile. So he's a professor and chief of department of Physiology in the National Taiwan University Children's Hospital. Okay, your time to deliver this lecture is around 30 minutes. 30 minutes.
30, okay.
Yes.
Could I have my slide, please?
Slide, please.
Okay. Thank you for your kind introduction. First of all, I want to thank the UGM to invite me to Indonesia, to a very beautiful country, to give a talk related to precision medicine. I'm the pediatric neurologist, so I will focus my talk over the precision medicine. Precision medicine related to pediatric neurology. My first slide. Oh, okay. So my hospital is located in northern part of Taiwan. You know that our hospital is the first national children's hospital in Taiwan, and also the first national children's hospital in Taiwan, also the first national children's hospital in Taiwan. So we have our Department of Pediatrics already have history of 117 years, and in Taiwan we are the oldest one. So after our have the Department of the Pediatrics, and then 15 years later, then there have the second Department of Pediatrics in other hospitals. So our hospital had the leading one in Taiwan. So we have the first national children's hospital in Taiwan from the 2014, and so next year will be the 10th anniversary for our children's hospital. And welcome everyone to join the 10th anniversary in the end of March, because we have one symposium. I'm now the superintendent for the children's hospital, and our children's hospital have the child-friendly environment design, and we have they're very beautiful. It's quite different from the other hospital, general hospital. And we also have the so-called crown doctor for some children may be admitted for a very long time. So they will come to the ward to pray with them. So they will stay in a ward like stay in their home. So they can maybe it's helpful for to cure their disease. And in fact, 6 years ago, I visited the UGM with the superintendent at the time, and we have a very good memory. I'm impressed by the very wonderful academic activity in UGM. So this time I visit again, so I have a different impression for the UGM. So I hope I can also learn from everything from UGM. And I also visited affiliated hospital at that time, and also meet some very important doctor in the hospital. So today's talk will be related to precision medicine. When we talk about precision medicine, we always mention about how to treat the patient correctly. And so is our hope and also our future, because your precision medicine or personalized medicine will change the future of all these children. So I'll just illustrate some cases for you why the correct diagnosis and the precision medicine is very important for children, for the patients. For example, for this one, you can see she is just the 4 years old girl to have the development delay and also her ataxia, and she also have hyperthyroidism, but we use the whole exome sequence and found she suffered from KRAS1A pathogenic variant. So we just used some medication to treat the patient. After treatment for 1 month, you can see she can walk very, very good. Just much improved after treatment. Before that, before you use the correct medication, she cannot walk very well. So after 2 years, 2 years of treatment, you can find she can now can learn how to do some exercise. She can stand and walk like this way very well. So without the correct treatment, she cannot walk very well. So the second case is the 14 years old girl that's mimicking the cerebral palsy. In the past, for patients with cerebral palsy, we can just do the physical therapy. But nowadays, we can buy a genetic test that you can make the correct diagnosis, treat the patient. For this one, she was found to have the tyrosine hydroxylase that you can see. So after treatment, you can see there's a very complicated pathway. Maybe I know that there are some pharmacology students here, so you may know the pathway here. So you know when there's any defect here, it will lead to the defect in the synthesis of the dopamine. So there's a lot of the symptoms related to dopamine deficiency. Before treatment, you can see there's a mild dystonia, ankle dystonia. So she was suspected to have cerebral palsy and received the treatment with the operation for the very tight Achilles tendon. But after relief, 1 or 2 months later, it turned back to be the dystonia. So we just diagnosed her to have the tyrosine hydroxylase deficiency. After treatment for 6 months, you can see her walking is very good. The third case is a recurrent cerebral ataxia. There's the 2 years old girl. She have the recurrent cerebral ataxia. That's for 1 to 2 weeks, every 2 to 4 months. And initially was suspected to have the autoimmune cerebralitis, so was treated with the very high dose steroid pulse therapy. And after treatment, they get improvement. But the cerebral ataxia relapsed again. So we just found she have the so-called the TPK1, the variant, pathogenic variant. So just treated with very high dose the Salamine. And after treatment, there is no more relapse of cerebral palsy. You can see before the treatment, she had the episodic cerebral ataxia lasting for 1 to 2 weeks. And after treatment for 6 months, you can see she can walk very well. After treatment for 1 year, she can run very well. So the different treatment changed her fate. And there's no change in the brain, no change in the cerebellum, just because she suffered from the genetic defect. So we talk about the precision medicine. Precision medicine imparted by genetics had produced a very important benefit, because we can make the correct diagnosis and treat correctly. But precision medicine is very complicated, because you have to know the single gene. You found the single gene responsible for such condition. You also have to know the function activity of the gene. then you can have the so-called precision medicine and treat the patients. So in the future, it is quite important for you to do some in vivo or in vitro the function study. So you can see in the past, you can just, for a patient with epilepsy, you can just make the diagnosis based on the clinical presentations and do the genetic test. And then you begin the anti-seizure medication treatment. And then maybe it is under treatment or there's still seizure. But nowadays, the precision medicine changed a lot. After the genetic test, you have to correct all the clinical information, and you can do the genetic searching to see what kind of function the gene responsible for, and do some in vivo or in vitro genetic test. Then you can conduct some clinical trial and do the precision medicine and change their fate. So you can do the gene discovery and make the diagnosis and know the natural history. The most important part, if you know their function of those genes, you can do some clinical trial and find the so-called precision medicine. So you can just collect a lot of data from the system biology or system neurophysiology and give the very big data, and also have to do the machine learning to find some information, and you can input a lot of biomolecular data, clinical data, literature data, and finally you can find some predicted biomarker from those data. You can also find a personalized the therapy, so-called precision therapy for these patients. So the system biology including some gene data, some metabolic data, some proteomics data. So you can include in microRNA data. So you can get a lot of very big data. And you can have the system neurophysiology. For example, you can get a lot of neural image data, the DTI, functional MRI, also PET or the EEG, and then you can find the possible impairment of the patient and find the correct medication to treat the patients. I'll show you some precision medicine we now use to treat the patient with epilepsy. For example, there is a lot of the disease here. For a sodium channel problem, we can use some sodium channel blocker to treat the patients. Then some patient involved the NMDA receptor, you can use them, maybe use the memantine to block the NMDA receptor and to get the improvement. So I show you that for example the sodium channel or sodium channel problem, you can just use the sodium channel. Even the patient have the working problem and have the intractable seizure, and the patient may have the immoral movement, tremor, and if made the correct diagnosis, you use the sodium channel antagonist to treat the patient, they will get a much improvement after treatment. Another one I can show you that you call the glucose transporter 1 deficiency. That's the one disease that the glucose cannot enter the neuron. So the neuron lack of the energy, so they will die. So there will a lot of the symptoms. Maybe they have the seizure, then maybe they have a cognitive impairment, maybe they have some movement disorder, spasticity, ataxia. So if you can make the correct diagnosis, you know that they suffer from GLUT1 deficiency, then you can use the ketogenic diet to treat the patients. And you can find after treatment, the seizure is under control, but there's still very mild ataxia. It means that if you can treat the patient earlier, maybe the seizure can be under control, and the movement disorder can also be controlled by your treatment. And so if you from the gene, the gene can be involved the different part of the neuron. They may be involved the ion channel. They may be involved the transportation or transcription regulation. They may involve the mTOR pathway. They may involve the synaptic functions. If you can make sure that what kind of the part of the neuron they involved, you can make a correct diagnosis, then use the personalized medication for such kind of the patients. I will give you some example. For example, this antibiotic drug is acting on mTOR receptor. So if there is a suffer from any epilepsy related to mTOR receptor, you can just use them to treat the patient. For example, this a patient with green 2D is related to NMDA receptor. And although it is not related to mTOR receptor, after treatment, you can see the EEG. Maybe you are not, you cannot read the EEG here, but you can see it's chaotic change over here. But after treatment, it becomes much better and much beautiful for EEG recording. And this is another one, GRIA 2 variant is related to mTOR receptor. So we just use the pramipral acting on mTOR receptor to treat the patient. You can see initially there's a chaotic change in EEG recording. After treatment, you can find the EEG become much better. It means that if you choose the correct antibiotic drug based on the pathogenic mechanism for the genetic defect, then you can get a much improvement after treatment. And this is another case related to tuberous sclerosis. And tuberous sclerosis, we know that it is related to mTOR pathway. And this antibiotic drug can act on the mTOR receptor. The mTOR receptor can also affect the function of mTOR pathway. So that's why if you use the pramipral to treat the patient with the tuberous sclerosis, the seizure can be under control. Just use the pramipral. So you choose the correct antibiotic drug based on the potential the functional impairment of the patient. And that's another one I mentioned to you. That's the green one. You use the memantine just block the NMDA receptor. You can see the EEG also get much improvement after treatment. And this another one is the TBT1D24. And the literature just did the Drosophila model to show that after use of the antioxidant, you can see there's an improvement in the model. So you can just apply the antioxidant to the patients and find there's a much improvement after the treatment. And serotonin receptor is also one of the potential mechanism for you to targeting, because in the past a lot of the seizure is related to serotonin receptor. So nowadays there are some new antibiotic drugs that just designed based on the serotonin receptor. Then, for example, there's one very important antibiotic drug called fenfluramine. It can act on the serotonin receptor, also act on the sigma-1 receptor. Both can lead to the seizure in the patients. So after you use the fenfluramine, you can see the seizure can be under control. So you can just choose the correct antibiotic drug based on the potential mechanism for the patients. So I can, for the precision medicine, I can just use the one example. Dravet syndrome is a very important epilepsy syndrome in children or also in adults. And the patient may suffer from the focal seizure like this way. And the patient have the sodium channel defect, SCN1A, the variant. So it will lead to the intractable seizure in the patients. So there are a lot of approach for precision medicine. You can use the different mechanisms of the anti-seizure drug. You can use the repurposed medication to treat the patient, including fenfluramine or the carbidopa or here. Or you can also use the gene therapy just to correct the SCN1A variant. For example, there's a lot of different design to just increase the SCN1A expression in neuron. Then you can, the Dravet syndrome can get improvement. Nowadays, there's already in phase 1, phase 2, or some trial had been already in phase 3 trial to see the efficacy of such kind of gene therapy in a patient with Dravet syndrome. And after treatment, the Dravet syndrome, the patient with Dravet syndrome, the seizure really under control. It means that the gene therapy is beneficial for the patients. And the mitochondrial disease is the mitochondrial dysfunction is another factor. Because for the patient with epilepsy, sometimes we will find the patient also have the mitochondrial dysfunction. So if we treat with the mitochondrial, maybe some medication to improve the mitochondrial function, where the patient, the condition of the patient will get improvement. You know, in the past, there are a lot of studies just showing the evidence of the mitochondrial dysfunction in the gene defect. So if you diagnose one patient with specific genetic defect, of course you can choose a mitochondrial medication to improve the mitochondrial function. Maybe the seizure or the cognition will improve. For example, I show you one example. The RAS2 gene is located in mitochondria. When there is any defect in this one, you can see the research chain have been changed a lot. So for that, we treat it with the medication to improve the respiratory chain function. The seizure can be under control. I just use the mitochondria, some medication to treat such kind of patient. They really get improvement. It means that if you know the possible functional change, when there is any specific genetic defect and apply the medication to the patient, they can really get improvement. So the precision medicine in epilepsy, there are the different strategies used. For example, you can strategic use of existing anti-seizure medication. For example, so for the glucose transporter 1 deficiency, you can use the ketogenic, or you can use for the sodium channel defect, you can use the sodium channel antagonist. You can also use the repurposed compound. For example, there's a lot of memantine for the green 2A, phenpharamine, serotonin for the Dravet syndrome. But you can also use the different kind of gene therapy. You can use the anti-ASO, antisense oligo, or AAV virus to treat the patient. You can use the ASO for SN1A, 2A, 8A, and UB3A patients, and use the CRISPR-Cas9 for SN1A, for AAV for Dravet syndrome. There are still a lot of issues we have to consider for precision medicine. One is the called enzyme replacement therapy. In the past, there's a lot of enzyme replacement therapy for patients with a metabolic disorder. For example, you can see there's a lot of enzyme replacement therapy for the patient with a metabolic disorder. And the most famous one is Pompe disease. Pompe disease is the one kind of lysosomal disorder. You can see after treatment with the enzyme replacement therapy, the patient can walk. Without treatment, maybe there is a cardiomegaly, there's a muscle weakness, that they cannot sit or cannot walk. But after treatment, they cannot walk like the normal children. So the enzyme replacement therapy really changed the fate of the patient with the Pompe disease. But there are still some issue to solve. For example, how to make the early diagnosis, how to reduce the cost or the accessibility of the therapy. And you know, the enzyme replacement therapy, it will induce the immune response. So they may have the autoantibody to targeting and the enzyme you supply to the patients. So how to reduce the immune response in enzyme replacement therapy? Maybe you can use the narrow scale, the enzyme delivery system to just reduce maybe the side effect and also reduce the enzyme immune response. And also just overcome for lost enzyme to enter some difficult reaching area like the brain CNS. You know, if you supply some enzyme, it cannot enter cross your blood-brain barrier. So enter your brain to cure your brain. So in our day, I show you that it have been done in Western countries just for the one disease called 0 and 2. they just use the intraventricular the enzyme replacement therapy because they cannot just inject into the vein because the enzyme cannot cross the blood-brain barrier to enter the brain. So they have to just inject from the ventricular injection. You can see without injection, the functional activity decreased a lot. You can see what is, This is my patient, and you can see that there's a she became bedridden after around 3 years without treatment. But with treatment, lots of patients with the CRN2 can now walk. So such kind of enzyme replacement therapy is helpful for these patients. And how about gene therapy? And gene therapy can also be applied in different disease states. Most famous one is over the neurotransmitter disorder. For example, we saw this pathway that when there's any kind of neurotransmitter disorder like ADC, it will lead to impairment in the synthesis of the serotonin and also and dopamine. So there's a study just inject into the subthalamic gland with a ADC gene, and found that after treatment, the ADC gene can diffuse to the basal ganglion area to improve the functions. So after treatment, you can see for the patient with ADC deficiency, the motor function becomes improved after treatment. And you can see arcular crisis, a very characteristic finding in patients with ADC deficiency, decreased a lot. And also the emotional problem also get improvement after treatment. It means that you use the gene therapy, you can just reverse the maybe 50% or more than 50% of their function. Of course, gene therapy has been applied in other diseases and it is still under phase 1 or phase 2 trial. For example, the Rett syndrome is due to the MECP2 gene mutation. It has been investigated for a very long time. The problem for the subgene therapy is that overexpression of MECP2 will also lead to another disease called MECP2 duplication syndrome. So for such kind of disease, it's quite difficult to understand because if under treatment, the symptom may not improve. But if over treatment may lead to the so-called MECP2 duplication syndrome. So they just designed a very complicated method approach to do the gene therapy. It's now under a phase 1 trial in Western countries. So if the future is still enrolling patients, and so in the future, if it turns out to be effective in treat the patient with the MECP2 variant, then you will change the fate of the patient with the Rett syndrome. Another very important one is called the Angelman syndrome. Angelman syndrome, there's the normal one called the genetic imprinting. Genetic imprinting means that maybe this one is no function, imprinting, no function, but there's the normal one, so the function of this gene UB3A will be normal. But when there's any variant or mutation in this chain of the DNA, it will lead to the Angelman syndrome. So the methodology is that you just turn on this one with genetic imprinting, then it becomes functional, then you can just cure the patient with the Angelman syndrome. It's also still under the phase 1 trial. It means that a different kind of approach for gene therapy will change the fate or the future of these children with the different neurologic disorder. So the SMA is also very important and also already been applied in the world. And is due to the type problem, I will speak faster, and is due to the defect in SMN gene. And so you know SM1 there is a deletion. You cannot see the very complete SMN protein. So there's a different approach to treat the patients, and then the major methodology is to just increase the full-length SMN protein. So the function will get improvement. I'll show you one case with this one is treated at 3 months. So after 3 weeks after the disease onset, you can find that after the treatment for a very long time, at 2 years and 6 months, that he can just stand by himself. But the next one was diagnosed at actual onset at around 1 month, and the treatment at around 3 months. So there is a delayed treatment. You can see she can only stand and link on the wall, and she cannot walk. So they are quite different. It means that the early treatment can improve the situation of the patients. So the DMD, I know that there's another talk related to DMD, so I will skip this part. DMD, there's a lot of gene therapy for it. There's diagnosis is not very difficult, and some medication have already been on the market. For example, there's a lot of gene therapy, including exon skipping. There are different exon skipping methodology approach. There's only this and already on the market is the atarunan, or you can just read through the nonsense variant. So you can just produce the full length dystrophin. And after treatment, they really change a lot of function, but the function still deterioration after treatment. Although compared with those without treatment, there's an improvement, but the function still deterioration. It means that the other gene therapy is still helpful for this patient. So there's a lot of other gene therapy. Just inject every night, inject some mini dystrophin to rescue these patients. So this clinical trial is still under the phase 3 trial. I'm still doing the related trial right now. So precision medicine is very important for all the countries in the world. In NIH in America, they began to have the precision medicine initiated from the 2015. And in Taiwan, we began to have the precision medicine initiated from the 2019. And so we want to collect 1 million people and DNA to do the analysis to find in the future where we can just to prevent the disease, the occurrence of the diseases. So hopefully we may find some biomolecular marker or the biogenetic marker to predict the outcome of the patient or the predict the occurrence of disease. So I'm very happy to hear that maybe in Indonesia you also want to have such kind of precision medicine initiative. So in the future, maybe all the country can have a more collaboration to gather more information for the patients. So the precision medicine, of course, is very important part, but you have to know the function of a single gene variant. Then you can do some clinical trial to find the personalized medication for the patient with a different neurologic disorder or different, not just a neurologic disorder. You should say that all the disorder can use the precision medicine. The major issue is that you have to find the genetic defect, and you have to know the functional defect for the gene, and then you can find the personalized medication for such kind of diseases. So last, I want to thank Eugene again for inviting me to give a very short talk related to precision medicine in neurologic disorder. I'm working in the National Taiwan University Children's Hospital. If you have any questions or you want to have more collaboration or want to maybe some study related to precision medicine, I welcome everyone can contact me by email. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. So, thank you for the interesting lecture regarding the precision medicine in pediatric patients, especially for congenital diseases. Next presentation will be with Dr. Ines. Are you here already?
I am indeed. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hi,
Can
let's
you
hope that I'm sharing my screen now. Can you see my screen?
Yes, it's clear. Yeah, we can see you
Let's
now.
hope. Okay, let's hope that the internet works well
Yeah,
enough.
hopefully, hopefully.
Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Yeah, thank you. Please, the time is around 30 minutes. Okay, this is the short bio sketch of Dr. Ines Irene Caterina Atmosukarto. Okay, Dr. Ines, time is yours.
That was very impressive. The music. Okay, thank you very much. So I'm here speaking on behalf of the Indonesian Ministry of Health. I'm acting as an advisor to the Minister of Health on a national genomics initiative. So I'm very pleased to be coming after the previous speaker who actually mentioned, that he was pleased to hear that Indonesia is building a national genomics initiative. And over the next 30 minutes, I would like to introduce you to this initiative in the hope that the researchers at UGM will see the potential of this initiative and will see the potential for using what we are trying to build here. So obviously this initiative starts from the interest or that the ministry has into leapfrogging Indonesia into precision medicine. And I think a lot of the previous speakers probably have already alluded to this, how we are at a point in time where we can move from conventional medicine, which looks at a patient as an average patient, where a patient is given a medication based on a clinical trial that essentially averages everybody, and everybody gets the same medicine, where some might actually get some benefit, some may have no benefit at all, and some may have adverse events, right? So with the tools and the technology that has been developed over the last few decades, we are now at a point where we can look at more precise approaches, and the previous speaker already mentioned a bit of that. So with the availability of technology, we can identify new biomarkers that allow us to actually look at the different people in the patients in the population and say, well, patient A is different from patient B because of these differences in biomarkers, right? In the biomarkers that we can measure. And as a result, patient A, because of the biomarker, that profile that they have, will get, the red medicine, and patient B, because of their biomarker, will get the blue medicine. Then we can see that everybody will hopefully have improved outcomes, and that we will also reduce these side effects. So in a nutshell, the treatments will address individuals' needs, and because we can actually look at the differences between each people, we can look at the differences between their risk factor and disease outcome. So we know that health is influenced by multiple factors, right? And having a better understanding of these risk factors is important in helping us prevent disease or also improve therapeutic outcomes, right? So we know that these risk factors, consist of various things, right? We know that our lifestyle, that includes, the food that we eat, our behavioral pattern, probably, make up 40% of these factors that influence our health. Then we have our family history, our genetics, right? We can't change that because we're born with that. And that actually makes up about 30% of these factors. On top of that, then you have your social history, right? Where do you live? What sort of air do you breathe, right? What are your social, are you isolated? All of these we know will also impact your health. And finally, we have your medical history, right? And that makes up, the last thing makes up about 10%, right? So did you get the right treatment when you needed it? All of that will actually, impact our health. Now, how do we get an insight into all of these different factors, right? So to be able to get the right treatment, we need to be able to measure or understand each of these factors, right? So we can move away from this one-size-fits-all approach, so to allow for more accurate diagnosis, better treatment outcome, better disease risk prediction, and accurate treatment selection, right? Now, if we think about our genetics, right, the things that we cannot change because we are born with these genetics, there's a lot of information that has been generated, right? There's millions of people that have participated in studies, where we have all these GWAS data. But, and this is really important for those of us that live or come from from Indonesia or from Asian backgrounds, or maybe I should say from non-European backgrounds. The reality is that data that has been generated over the last 10 years, and I'm talking here about genetics data, right? Genetic genomics data. That information has been generated mostly from Caucasian populations. It doesn't, it makes sense. These studies were done when sequencing costs were higher, right? So they were obviously done in the countries that have the budget to do this. But as a result, the data and the analysis that is available now is heavily biased towards one population. It's heavily biased towards European, Caucasian population, which if we look at the distribution of the world, actually that's a smaller percentage of the population if we compare that to the Asian population, right? So if we combine East Asian and Southeast Asian population, we actually make up a biggest proportion of the world's population. But look at how little information there is about our genetics data. So knowing that, understanding that means that there needs to be investment into this, right? There needs to be investment into building this information. And one of the things, why would we want to do that? Well, a very easy, straightforward explanation that we've put forward to the ministries. If you look at some of these medications that are given to our patients, right, like clopidogrel, which is an antiplatelet therapy, it makes up, a huge part of our cost, right, of the cost of the Indonesian's healthcare, right? It's the second most prescribed drug. But it turns out that based on the data that we can see out there, almost 30% of Asian populations actually won't respond very well to this therapy. So if you think about it, a third of the people that are treated with this drug, and this will be stroke patients, for example, will not respond or have a lower chance of responding to this drug. That means, this information is actually important because it should be part of actually designing how we treat our population. So that's like a tangible example. So with this sort of background, right, the Ministry of Health since last year has been wanting to invest and focus on building a more competitive edge in this era of precision medicine. So we can, we as Indonesia can ride this wave of development that is currently happening, especially since we are such a big population. 280 million people live in this archipelago. But to do that and to be able to harness the unique diversity of our population and understand how this diversity might impact the health of our population, there needs to be investment, right? There needs to be investment in strengthening healthcare ecosystem. There needs to be strengthening in information system, right? How we collect information from our patients through things like a centralized electronic health record, We need to be able to manage our genomic assets. I always think about this richness as an asset, and we need to strive for scientific excellence. And that's where you, the scientists at Gajah Mada University, through collaborations, through strategic collaboration with your partners, like the previous speakers, can actually build capacity to strive for this excellence in scientific research. So, now's the time for foundational and fundamental changes to transform our health ecosystem. And then the reason for that is that, it's probably a good time, because we are seeing the cost of certain technology go down to the point where it is actually thinkable for a low and middle income country like Indonesia to be able to think about doing things at a large scale, right? So we look at the technologies that should be able, that we need to master to be able to implement precision medicine, right? Sequencing platforms make up a big part of this technology, right? Our ability to read our genome, our ability to read our transcriptome, our ability to read our epigenome, our ability to read metagenomes, right? If we're trying to diagnose certain diseases. Now, the sequencing cost has gone down dramatically, right? From hundreds of thousands of dollars per sample when I finished my PhD to now what is essentially hundreds of dollars per genome now, right? And we can do that, and we can achieve this cost if we do them at a large scale, right? So this is why the Ministry of Health is looking at building capacity and investing in this ability to address the many pressures on health and to transform the healthcare ecosystem. And that's because our healthcare ecosystem is under significant pressures, right? We still have infectious diseases in Indonesia, but at the same time, we are actually seeing an increase in chronic diseases, in degenerative diseases, at the same time as we haven't quite finished to deal with our infectious disease threats. We're seeing geographic disparity, right? Because Indonesia is an archipelago. So Indonesia needs to think of a strategic way of actually implementing this to actually enable this in various parts of Indonesia, not just in Java. And we need to try and do it so that we can lower the cost of these new treatments, right? So leapfrogging into precision medicine actually requires us to build a strong ecosystem, and this is where the Biomedical and Genome Science Initiative, or BGSI, which was launched late last year by the minister himself, comes into play. This initiative actually mimics, or is not something different to what is already out there. If we look around the world, we can see a number of countries that have actually got this sort of national genomics initiative. Obviously, you can see that a lot of these countries will be Caucasian, from the Caucasian population, although you start to see countries like Japan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, also, and obviously China also built. So hopefully, in a year or two from now, we will see this map being updated with Indonesia having its own color there, So what is BGSI going to do? BGSI wants to invest in the future through the building of a national biobank, a national registry system to actually manage the data that is linked to every sample that is in this biobank. It is now building a centralized high-throughput genomic sequencing capacity in Jakarta, where whole genome sequences can be generated in that facility at a lower cost. It's building bioinformatics capacity to support researchers from various, whether they come from the Ministry of Health or from universities. And it wants to ensure secure and ethical data sharing, because the data that is generated is not going to be used by BGSI itself to do analysis. the data and the sample that is generated or it's managing will be made available to you, the researchers. So you can look at this and actually analyze it to improve health and build capacity. So we see this as a way of building value for the ecosystem through accessible sample collection with well annotated data. That's the important thing, having the well annotated data. We would like to see this data maybe being used towards building a genome reference for Indonesia, but even if we don't have a reference, there will be a national database of genomic sequences from all over Indonesia. And obviously, we want to make these sequencing services accessible as well as biobanking services, right? So that they can be used not just by the Ministry of Health, but by other partners in the ecosystem. So this ecosystem is two-tiered. It's centered around hospitals, what we call in Indonesia vertical hospitals, like your Sarjito Hospital that is close to Gadjah Mada University. It's centered around 8 conditions or diseases, ranging from metabolic disease, cancer, infectious disease, brain and neurodegenerative disease, rare diseases. Now I'm highlighting rare diseases because this is based in Yogyakarta, the Sarjito Hospital, aging, wellness and nutrition, which will be based in Bali. Then we have the maternal and neonatal and cardiovascular hubs. So these are our hubs. There will be 8 hubs that will be collecting samples, that will be collecting data, and these samples and this data will then be shared to this centralized facility, which is in Jakarta, where there will be a national biobank, where every sample or the duplicate of every sample that's collected from these 8 hubs will be shared and stored for long-term storage at the National Biobank in Jakarta. The data will be managed through this national registry system. There will be bioinformatics support tools that are going to be accessible by all members of the ecosystem, and there will be a data sharing access platform that can be used by you, the researchers, to access this data. So some of these systems we have built, the biobanking and registry system we've built in the last year, and we are now in the process of building this bioinformatics and data access system. But while we're doing that, we're already collecting samples. So there are over 2,500 samples that have already been collected for that, which will, we hope, be used by university, pharma, including startup, to build, to drive innovation. So I think I mentioned the various hubs with the various focus on diseases, right? And these are all centered around specific hospitals. Now, if other hospitals are interested in also participating and donating or building more data and more samples, biobanks, and adding to the biobanks, then they can become spokes or satellites to these hubs. So in a way, then we can increase the outreach of the collection strategy for these samples. So what's our roadmap? So we want to build a proof of concept for the first 2 years, right? So we're in the middle of this period now. So by the end of next year, we hope to have recruited at least 10,000 participants in this national biobank, and we hope to have completed the sequencing, the whole genome sequencing for these participants. Building on from that, we want to move to a nationwide scale phase with over 1 million participants, obviously cumulatively over the following 5 years. Obviously, we strive, our purpose is to ensure that data collection will adhere to ethical, legal, and social norms of this country. So if we look at the biobanking itself, we've built these 2-tier biobanks where each of the 9 hospitals that are involved have their own biobanks. So the samples that they collect from the clinic, obviously the participants go through consenting, recruitment, and the specific and standardized questionnaires that they will have to complete. The samples are collected at the clinics and then sent to their local biobanks, which are in the hospitals. As samples start to build in these local biobanks, and there will be regular shipment of duplicates. So not all of the samples, the local hubs will keep part of the samples, but at least the duplicates will then be sent to these central facilities. So you can see how it's a two-tier system. You know, it allows us to build in some resilience in case of unexpected things, like in Indonesia, you know, we have earthquakes and floods and other force major type things. So in this way, even if something happens at one of the hubs, there will always be a second place where important samples will be stored. High throughput sequencing capacity, as I said before, will be done in Jakarta. So at the moment, we're finishing the renovations of the what used to be the Eichmann building in the RSCM hospital, and there we already have received all of these equipment. You know, we've got a T7 from BGI, Nova 6000 from Illumina, and a promethazine from Nanopore. All three platforms will be run in this proof of concept stage so that we can evaluate each of these platforms. We'll be generating about 5,000 samples on this platform, another 5 on this, and we actually have funds for generating 3,000 on this. So you can see that we actually have we will try to understand each of these platforms and determine which one is best for long-term use in Indonesia. On the data aspect, so as I was saying, with support from the Digital Transformation Office at the Ministry of Health, we're building this data management systems or platform, one to collect and manage the clinical and demographic information that is linked to each participant. Another one to manage the samples that are in the biobank. A third one to manage the data analysis aspect, and the last one will be the sharing portal, right? So these two are more mature and they have already been deployed. These two are still being developed, but hopefully will be fully usable next year. All of these are made available and implemented not just at the central facility, but also in each of the 9 hospitals. So you can see how we're trying to standardize behaviors and data management. You can actually track what is happening in this initiative through the BGSI website. There is actually a dashboard there where you can actually see how many samples are being recruited or over time. So you can see that most of our samples are currently coming from the Cancer Hub. And you can see that Sarjito is already also collecting quite a few samples from the rare disease patients. So with time, we will start to see these numbers go up, and we can also start to see how the whole genome sequencing progress is happening, right? So we hope to be starting full speed sequencing over the next few weeks. Now, I think I'm coming towards my last slide. When we look at, what we're trying to do is combine a lot of different aspects, right? And all of this through cutting edge technologies, because we know that that's how, we build, resilience for, we build capacity to innovate in health in the future, right? And we know that all of the data, if managed properly, can be used in the future through artificial intelligence to build solutions that are, more suitable to our population, right? BGSI focuses mostly on this side of the diagram, right, on building multi-omics data. Obviously, first one is genomics, but the samples that we are storing can then be used for other purposes. But then you can see how you can add on so much more information, right? And be that for wearables or in time through our electronic medical records, as I probably forgot to say, but the registry platform is prepared to be able to talk to the hospital's electronic medical record system. So in that way, we can also utilize that information. Innovation, we hope, will be driven by you, by the researchers in industry, in the university, and that will be through development, of new therapies, new diagnostics, but also through, supporting using this data for evidence-based health policies. So we can support the Ministry of Health in improving its system. So I don't think I've taken my whole 30 minutes, but I hope that has given you enough of a background about what it is that we are trying to build. If there are any questions, I'll be more than happy to respond.
Thank you, Dr. Ines. So now applause for both of our speakers. Now we are on the question and answer session. I would like to invite Prof. Wang-Tso to come to the stage for the question and answer session. And also Dr. Ines on online. So guys, it's time for question and answer session. Do you have any question? Yeah, I can see many questions start from the front. Yeah, please. Oh, you can go to the speakers.
Test.
Yeah, please.
Hi. For my first question for Professor Huang, I'm interested in you mentioned on the replacement enzyme therapy, if I'm not mistaken. Can you explain a bit on how it is developed and how is it a bit different from just using gene therapy, and how is it important in precision medicine? And for my second question, for the second speaker, my question is that I can see that Indonesia is going towards precision medicine with all the mechanisms and the planning they have done. And a big round of applause to Indonesia, because this initiative is still new in the ASEAN region. My question is that apart from this planning and all, how do you actually convince the population that this is one of the most important steps a nation has to do in regards to implementing precision medicine and replacing the current method of medication? Thank you.
For first questions, you mentioned about the difference between the enzyme replacement therapy and gene therapy. For enzyme replacement, if you know that some disease that with the maybe the lack of the specific enzyme, theoretically you can just apply the enzyme, then it can be cured. It's a very simple thinking. But the problem is that the enzyme cannot enter some specific, very difficult reaching the organism, organ like the brain or bone or something like that. So you have to have the very specific the delivery system, not maybe the near scale the delivery system to deliver the enzyme to the specific area. And but for gene therapy, you can just maybe you can carry the whole gene to your body. But the major problem is that how can you make sure that the gene go to the area where the specific part of you want to cure. So if you can find you can find the gene therapy, of course we have to choose the gene therapy. But in fact, for example, for Pompe disease, they have to try to find where they can do the gene therapy to cure the patient, but it doesn't work. And they tried for several times. So for such kind of patients, that they have to use the enzyme replacement therapy.
Thank you, Prof. Next is Dr. Irene.
Shall I try and answer the second question?
Yes, yes, please.
Thank you. That's a very, very good question, right? So yes, you're right. The minister has done the ministry has done all this planning. We've actually done implementation. So, you know, it's not just a plan. We have the facility, we have the systems built. Now, how are we going to convince patients and people to participate? And I think that will depend heavily, obviously, on the education that we do through doctors, through people like you, like the researchers, the young researchers of the future of Indonesia, and I hope also demonstrating benefit, right? So we are trying to also integrate in the program a way to benefit the people that participate in the program, be that, for example, through giving them access to pharmacogenomics information, you know, as part of a benefit that they have from participating in the program. But I agree, it will require a lot of education of the public and of the healthcare workers as well, so that they can actually understand how we do that.
Okay, thank you. So next question, please.
Okay, hi, my name is Nurul Huda binti Musa from Malaysia. So thank you for both of our speakers, very interesting talk. I have two questions. My first question to Prof. Wang about the precision medicines. It's very interesting to have a look at your case study on how the patients with the precise treatment can improve their life within less than 1 year. So my question is that for certain disease like with the phenotypic and genotypic variability, how the precision medicines can target on these complex disease with the reduced penetrance that have both recessive and the dominant mutations. So how precision medicine, if you have any previous studies with the incomplete penetrance, how these precision medicines can cater the complex diseases like this? And my second question to Dr. Ines, the same as the previous students' questions, but I would like to have a look at the higher level.
Multifactorial diseases with low penetrance.
Oh, okay. I would like to hear your opinions at the from the higher levels. So just now the question is on the populations, on the people, but what about the to kickstart the whole ecosystem, the healthcare ecosystem? How we can integrate at the different levels, the ministry, the academicians, the clinicians, and also from the industry. What is the networking that can integrate all these people together to kickstart the system like now that you can produce the 2-tier biobank? So thank you.
Sorry, for the first question, you mentioned about for very complicated disease, right? How can we choose the precision medicine, right? If you face a patient with very complicated disease, first of all, you have to find the precise etiology for response for the so complicated disease. So for me, nowadays I will proceed to do the genetic test, the whole exome sequencing. And if we can find the specific gene responsible for such kind of very complicated, then I will try to search for some study in the past, maybe studying on this gene to find whether there's some pathway maybe beneficial for the patient, then I will choose the correct medication for this patient. If there is no study in the past related to this gene, maybe sometimes in my lab, I will do it by myself if it's very interesting and I really get some patients. But you cannot do the function for every gene. So it depends whether there's some study in the past study on this gene and find some very interesting finding. For example, I mentioned to you that a lot of genes will affect mitochondrial functions. So if I can find that the gene really affect mitochondria, I will use some medication improving my respiratory chain and to treat the patient.
Thank you, Prof. Wang. Dr. Irene?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So a way to kickstart this, and I think you understand the question comes from the fact that you understand how complex it is to get so much engagement from different parties, right? So I think one of the key was that the minister wanted this to be driven by hospitals, not by academicians and academic institutes. So we looked, each of the hospitals looked deeply at what they wanted to be the focus of this first phase, right? So by doing that, then obviously the doctors identified the needs, and then we are focusing the first programs on that. An easy example is, for example, at Cipto Mangunkusumo, they didn't have the ability to diagnose MODIC, diabetes of the young, right? Mature onset diabetes of the young. So we focus like this, building this capacity. So the doctors don't need to send the samples overseas, right? They don't need to send the samples to Canada or wherever it was that they were sending them before. So I think, you know, this way we get engagement with the clinicians, because the ideas and the needs, they came from the clinicians. They didn't come from the ministry. They didn't come from academicians. They actually came from the clinicians, right? But then what the ministry is doing is actually trying to support these clinicians that have the vision and the passion to try and develop this by facilitating the building of the infrastructure and the systems, right? So that we can do this in a nicely coordinated, centralized way. So we can build, you know, by putting all the data together, we actually have so much power than each of the hospitals doing it by themselves, right? So that's why we have these two-tiered systems, right? It's to allow to build power through combining our data. Now, with the people outside of the direct ecosystem, so that's the industry or the universities, we actually have set up a clear pathway for collaboration, and that's through one door. If someone is interested in collaborating, they go through the central, they go and put in a request through the central BGSI management, and we deal with everything else downwards, right? So then, you know, each of these startups or companies don't have to deal with like so many different stakeholders, right? So we're trying to simplify things, and by having a centralized data sharing portal, then that means it's very clear how these people can access the data. You're obviously not going to get emailed the data, right? That data is not downloadable. There's a sharing portal that you can use to access the data in a safe way. You can do your analysis there, download your analysis, but the raw data remains, you know, remains in our system. So that this way we can actually make sure that we try to avoid data leaking, you know, overseas, which has happened a lot, right? So this comes from a deep evaluation of what has happened before, where there was a lot of parachuting researchers from overseas coming, getting samples from here, taking them overseas, and then there's not enough capacity building in country. We hope that through doing this, we not only encourage more collaboration, but actually drive capacity building, right? I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. So let's move to the next question. Yes, please.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Livia. I'm a student of University of Gajah Mada. Thank you for the presentation. It's really awesome, doctors. Well, my question is, my question is to Dr. Ines. This whole idea of the precision medications, I think it's really awesome, and I think the personalized medications, this really need to be supported with more sophisticated system and also technologies. And I believe that this kind of medication could be valued up to millions or even billions of US dollars worldwide. So my question is, I think there's still a potential problem with this type of medication in the future. It could change the aim from elevating the healthcare to getting more profit. And what is your opinion about this kind of problem, Dr. Ines? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ines.
That's an interesting question, right? I mean, I think I think we're not naive we're not naive. We know that every single development that's happened in healthcare is driven by companies, right? I mean, the tools that we have, they're made by companies. They're not made by governments. The medication that we have, they're developed by companies, and these companies will be driven by, obviously be driven by wanting to make a profit. So that is true. But by building our capacity to participate actively in the drug development process, right? Be that through the use of our samples or of our data, then that puts us in a different position to negotiate, right? If your drug that targets a specific rare disease is developed and tested through clinical trials done in Indonesia using our samples and our data, then obviously the government will then be in a position to actually negotiate harder, right, with drugs companies, right? Because, hey, you actually develop this with our support, right? So obviously we want lower access, right, lower pricing, or maybe we want to participate in a different way. In fact, I was just in a meeting with the minister this morning where I witnessed him do exactly that, right, talking to a drug company that wants to do clinical trials here, and he said, okay, but if you're going to be testing it on our patients, then what's in it for me, right? And having these assets means that we can actually be in a position to negotiate, right? If you don't have anything to bring to the table, then you don't have any power for negotiating, right? But if you can say, well, we have, 10,000 patients that fit your criteria, you can access the data and whatever and be done with your study in 5 months, but in return, we want A, B, C, D, then that gives us power to negotiate. So I think that's where we can use what we're developing now to be in a better position to negotiate. So those companies will still make profit, but hopefully some of those will actually come back and flow back to our population. That's my answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ines. More question from the participant? Do you still have any question, guys? Maybe question from me. Prof. Wang, looking at your lectures, it seems that doing diagnosis using genetics profiling is common in Taiwan, right? Is it usually you do that to all of your patient, or you do it's like a common or a conventional therapy? Then if it is failed, you continue with the more scrutinized to their genetics, or you go you check their genetics every time?
It depends. It depends. Yes, in Taiwan, maybe all the doctor take the different attitude for genetic test. For me, because for example, I'm a pediatric neurologist. I found a patient did not respond to the treatment. I will use the genetic test to see what kind of genetic mutation I can find. Then I can maybe change my medications. Nowadays, in Western country or in European countries, all the patient with the epilepsy will have the genetic test. If they did not suffer from acquired neurologic problem, they will do the genetic test. Nowadays, in Taiwan, I also do the genetic test for nearly all patients with the neurodevelopmental disorder. Like the autism, I will suggest them to do the genetic test, because if we found some genetic variant in patients with autism, sometimes we will choose the correct medication. For example, for patients with the SIMGAP1 variant, that is quite common in patients with autism. If you found a patient suffer from the SIMGAP1 variant, you can choose a peripheral to treat the patient, because it just targeting the same signal transduction pathway. So if you it is still remain very expensive to do the whole exome sequence in Taiwan. So if the money is not a major issue for you, then I will suggest them to do the genetic test. But for those poor families, I will try to raise some funding to support them for genetic test in Taiwan, in my hospital for my patients.
So after failed with the conventional therapy, then you will suggest them to do the genetic testing?
If I suspect the patient to have a neurometabolic disorder, all the patients should have the genetic test.
Directly.
And if they suffer from the epilepsy, of course, if they respond very well to the treatment, I will not do the genetic test because it is very expensive. But if they did not respond very well to the treatment, I will do the genetic test.
Have you ever experienced when you did the genetic testing that you cannot find anything, or you find something that might be correlated with the disease, but there is no treatment for that?
For the genetic test, nowadays most people agree that if do the whole exome sequencing and you get the genetic result, you can change the therapy in maybe 10% to 20% of the patients. But in future, maybe the figure will be much higher. When we're talking about the cerebral palsy 5 years ago, not so many doctors will do the genetic test for these patients. But nowadays, this year, all the doctors are promoting the genetic test for all the patients with cerebral palsy. Because even if they have some risk factor for the cerebral palsy, like they may be suffer from the hypoxic ischemia and cerebral palsy during the near stage, there are still 7% of the patient is due to the genetic factor. So you have to do the genetic test. For example, for COVID-19 problem, what's the reason you suffer from COVID-19 infection, and other people will not suffer from the very severe COVID-19 problem infection? So we are doing the whole exome sequencing for all the patients we enrolled for the COVID-19 infection with a severe presentations. That we really found some very interesting genetic factor responsible for the severe presentation for COVID-19 infection. So I know that I think that the genetic test is very important for most patients with neurologic disorder.
One more question. Sorry. One more question. You mentioned in your slide about a CRISPR-Cas9 based therapy in our university, we use the method for in vivo and in vitro study, but not yet in human. In Taiwan, have you CRISPR-Cas9 based?
Oh, CRISPR.
Yeah. Here we use it for experiment in the lab. But do you have any treatment that already been received marketed in Taiwan?
For CRISPR-Cas9 therapy, there is still some risk. There are some debate about the safety for the CRISPR-Cas9 approach. But in the future, maybe it can be used in humans. In my lab, of course, we use the CRISPR-Cas9 for just for study, experience study.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Prof. Wang. So now, Dr. Irene, are you still here with us?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, I have a question for you regarding the hubs that you mentioned. You know that Indonesia consists of many different ethnic groups, but the hubs that you mentioned, most in Jawa and also in Bali, right? How do you have any strategy, or the BGSI program have any strategy to also cover other ethnic outside Java and Bali?
That's a very good point, and probably if I had to criticize the program that we built, that would be also my first criticism. But obviously we had to also select based on the readiness of the hospitals as well. So that is true that those hospitals are mostly in Java and Bali, but as we know, even in Jakarta, we come from very different places as well. So hopefully we may cover some diversity that way. One of our programs, which is the infectious disease one, actually recruit through sites in all of the provinces all over Indonesia. So for some diseases, there's already programs to involve other sites. And that's why I mentioned very rapidly, but we have the hubs, but then on top of that, we have what we call spokes and satellites. So satellites will be hospitals that can work with the hubs, and they can be in other places, in other islands, but they can implement the same protocol, if you want, for recruiting the patients, and then send the samples to the hubs for further analysis, if those hospitals don't have the infrastructure. If the hospitals have the necessary infrastructure, for example, for storing samples, then they will become spokes, because that means they can build their own little biobanks if they so wish, and keep their samples on site and then share it with the program. So with time, I hope that I can show not just the hubs, but we can show how the hubs build networks with other hospitals in other islands to then extend the diversity of our biobank. So slowly but surely, I hope, Doc.
Thank you, Dr. Irene. Do you still have any question, or are you already waiting for the lunch? Okay, no more question? If no, thank you very much, Dr. Irene and also Prof. Wang. So we are already at the end of the session, the plenary session. Thank you very much for all of our speakers. Hopefully we can apply the precision medicine also in Indonesia with the BGSI, and we can move and then apply it like in Taiwan have done. Thank you very much. I return the time to Yopi, the Master of Ceremony.
Alright, thank you so much, Prof. Lee, Bu Dwi Aris, and also Bu Ines. Bu Ines, thank you so much. Hopefully on the next session we can join with you directly into Jakarta, Bu Ines. And that was the preliminary session, everyone, and after this you can enjoy the lunch in the lobby auditoriums until 1 p.m. and at 12:30 you will be have some mini performance from your friends and also from the other performers at 12:30. So make sure you are gathered in the lobby auditorium to enjoy some mini performance by your friends and another performers. Okay, so we gather again at 1 p.m. at the same place. Okay, so enjoy your lunch, everyone.